Hello, everyone, and welcome to your Daily Detroit, sharing what to know and where to go in Southeast Michigan. It is Wednesday, March 6th, 2024, coming to you from the beautiful Tech Town studio, where we are recording this episode of Daily Detroit. I am Jer Stays. Across the table from me is none other than
Norris Howard, as always on Wednesdays, man. How are you doing, Jeremiah?
I am having a beautiful day. I am glad to be here. We've got a couple of things I want to talk about. One, I think we need to unpack some listener feedback.
Absolutely. You know I love it. Good, bad, agree, disagree. I am all for the people voicing their opinions.
And then I went ahead and got into some mess, Norris.
Yeah, well, that's what you do.
Yeah. There was a piece in the local journalism forum by Crain's Detroit Business, and a headline, "Being vital is a better strategy than going viral." We'll talk about that. But first, the feedback, and people have strong feelings. One, I'm going to say this before we get into it. There was a good number of people, Norris, who were like, hey, your analysis was pretty spot on. So we're going to start with the good part there.
Okay.
But we're not going to dwell on it because honestly, there isn't that, like, agreeing. We don't have that much to talk about. You agree?
No.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for that feedback.
But I appreciate that. But I'm more interested in seeing where people differ from me because that's what opens the dialogue.
So I'm going to surface a couple of comments that work along themes, you know, because you had like a split vote with how people felt. And this is specifically in regards to that conversation about the Michigan primary.
Yes, and the uncommitted vote that got over 100,000 people on board with it in protest of the current conflict in Gaza.
So one of them, DJ Metzler, Norris, Macomb County has changed a lot from Reagan. We went blue until Trump. Now it is substantially red. Sterling Heights in Northern Warren is still a bellwether and shifts with the winner most elections. Fast food prices have already hurt the poor. Most poor people don't do fast food unless you have steep value. That said, your comments on surge pricing are right on. So,
yeah, I mean, spot on. I think there's still a ideological assumption of what Macomb County is, but yeah, I mean, that's what the numbers say. I'm not going to argue with the numbers because they are what they are. I mean, you know, but I will say that I think my assertion still stands when it comes to where the election is going to be won and lost, and talking about Oakland County and talking about where those middle voters are, because we see that in Macomb County, even though it can shift red or blue, is red right now.
There's a book a few years ago that I absolutely think it was prescient. It was called The Big Sort. Mm-hmm. And it was about how people are choosing to live next to people that agree with them. This is a precursor for all of the things that have been happening. We are self-selecting into neighborhoods and into communities. And I feel like in Macomb County, we have self-selected into red. I even see that in our listenership where, and I love you, Macomb County listeners. You are wonderful.
We do, man.
But like, there are more people in Washtenaw that listen to this show than Macomb County.
Yeah.
Like it is an Oakland, Wayne, City of Detroit, Washtenaw show. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I didn't mean that. And, you know, we definitely will have, you know, people like Candace Miller on, and we try to give as much service as we can, but we just don't make that much traction there because, well, I mean, I'm sure there's a litany of reasons.
Yeah, there's a litany of reasons. And, you know, I'm pretty sure there's some other shows that folks in Macomb County choose to listen to, and that's okay.
100%.
Yeah.
And one that has an anonymous name. I don't usually like to go with the anonymous names because I don't know their real name, but I got this a lot from people, Norris. Mm-hmm. Norris, how are you a so-called progressive when you support this president? Come on, man. Like a lot of people were like, there's no way you're a progressive if you're going to vote for Biden.
So I think number one, what I have to say about this is that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I asserted that I support anything that's going on in Gaza, nor do I support the president. I don't think I said who I was voting for or anything like that. So that's an assumption, I think. But beyond that, I think one thing that we have to realize, I think if we're going to continue in this country about what is progressive, what is conservative, what is any of these titles, is we have to stop defining it by what I, the individual, think it is, or what, you know, making it a very personal thing, right? If I support environmental freedoms, if I support a woman's right to choose, if I support, voters' rights, if I support LGBTQ rights, if I support rights for all racial ethnic minorities, if I support all those things, if I support taxing corporations, That makes me a progressive. That is what those are all progressive policies. That's what that means. One issue does not all of a sudden invalidate all of the rest of the issues that I stand for. I think one thing, especially on the left, and I'm not trying to minimize this issue. I think this is one issue that is going to define not just this election, but define how people view this sort of era in time. Is I do also think that people have to recognize that every global issue is never going to rank number one for every voter. And that is a very hard pill to swallow. I think that's a very tough thing to talk about. But if I am a, white middle-class woman in Georgia, I don't think Palestine is the first thing on my mind when I'm going to vote. Now,
It might be, but it's probably not.
It might be. It is possible it could be. But there are also other issues on my mind. As a Black person who is from Detroit, there are many things on my mind in addition to Gaza. And so I think boiling people down to those single issues, I think boiling people down to do you support a war or a genocide or not, I think is also inflammatory, because at the same time, the president can't wave his hand and all of a sudden change the entire foreign policy apparatus of the nation. That's not how our government works.
Former President Obama said something that really stuck with me. That in fact, the president is middle management.
It is. It is.
We keep trying to treat the presidency as a king,
yes,
but he's not.
The ultimate power lies with Congress, right?
And Congress has been a mess for years.
Well, not just that, but Congress, and this is why we be telling everybody, oh, if you want to affect real change, vote in your local elections, vote in your midterms, vote in those elections that we see, voter participation drops off by 35, 40%. Yeah, you want to affect real change? Put people in Congress. That's how you
or your
affect
state
change.
legislature.
Or your state legislature. So I think, first of all, by making the assumption that I support or don't support the president based off the comments that I had last week, I think is a little bit is presumptuous. But at the end of the day, the president is not the king. So while I support what this vote was, and I think that what was shown and what was illustrated was effective, and I think it was a great way to show the rest of the country how you can use a primary to still voice your concerns. I still think that there is a lot of people who have a fundamental, I don't want to say misunderstanding, but a dumbing down of just how complicated and complex this issue is.
I think a lot of people wish there were more choices, but I don't. As much as I would like to see some things like ranked choice voting or whatever.
I love ranked choice voting.
And I definitely want to have somebody on the show to talk about it, like an expert around it. I've been trying to book somebody for a while. It's just been a pain to do. We're in the system we're in right now. Yep.
And we got to use it the best we can. And, I can call myself whatever I want to call myself because I know what I stand for. So I also think that doesn't help the cause, right? If you are a progressive or a conservative, I hate no true Scotsman arguments, right? That's a logical fallacy.
That's happening over on the right now.
It's
right?
happening everywhere. And that's my point. It's happening everywhere, okay? That is a textbook logical fallacy to say that you are not a blank because you don't do blank. No, that's flat out. It's wrong to do that to people. And I think we need to sit down and have a conversation about what does this term, progressive or conservative, mean to you or to me, and maybe we actually could find some middle ground. But I think, hopping on these types of shows and saying that to not just commentators, but to your peers or to others, I think is disingenuous, and it actually makes people not want to be on your side.
I think it also breeds apathy.
Yes.
There's this concept that I call roll and scroll, meaning people roll their eyes and scroll by. And I think that's part of the whole issue that you're seeing in media where apathy is a number one thing.
It is apathy.
Apathy is huge out there, or people who are like, I just want to live my life, or I just want to see pictures of my friends' kids or whatever. There's a reason people are tuning out. And one of those reasons is this like, well, if you don't 100% agree with me, screw you.
Exactly.
And then like people have lives, man.
Yeah, well, and not just that. And again, let me not trivialize the issue at hand when it comes to Gaza. That is not what I'm doing. However, we also have to be honest and say Israel and Gaza are not America. They're only a certain pulling back our funding from Israel is a way we could affect it, but we cannot control if Gaza decides to attack Israel, if Israel decides to attack Gaza. Ultimately, we cannot have any say in that. And I think we have.
It might slow things down.
It'll slow things down, but ultimately, those are other entities. Neither one of those are suzerainities to the United States, even though some people think Israel might be. But the point is it's its own independent nation. And I think we just have to be honest in saying that there are some domestic issues that other voters are going to emphasize more than that. And that's my ultimate point when it comes to Oakland County and those middle of the road voters. I don't think Israel-Palestine is on the top of their list when it comes to this election. So I think on top of this, we get the comments about not just, the Israel-Gaza conflict, but we get comments every week. And I think a lot of this stems to media literacy. I think a lot of people get their information from too few sources, to be frank. And, Jared, you were talking about this in your piece. Talking about, being vital, being integral, being a part of someone's life as opposed to news being viral. And that's something that I actually really rock with. And I would like you to explain a little bit more about this piece, because to me, I think it's a really important point moving forward.
So as this thing has been existing a while, it always makes me laugh when people think that we have this huge apparatus. Like, I love the studio that we have here, but there was no contractor to build it. Like, me, Fletcher, Randy Walker were here late nights making it happen. Like, going to IKEA. Me and producer Cheyenne went to IKEA and literally bought bookshelves, and Luciano and I constructed them. Like, this is an extremely bootstrap operation. And literally every single dollar matters around here. And one of the things I keep getting told is, well, what about virality and all this other stuff? And I it's not that I know how to make things viral. I've made some things in the past go locally viral and do some things. But one of the things that caught my eye a few months ago was a creator that's out of Michigan, now lives in New York, talks about urbanism stuff. And he'll have 500,000, 1 million, 1.5 million people look at his reels or videos or whatever. Makes literally no difference in his life. Literally none. Maybe some people recognize him at the bar.
Yeah.
And buy him a drink.
Yeah.
But virality as far as a career, it used to be that if you could go viral, you could then build that into something else. You and I are both old enough to remember that. That is not the case anymore at all.
No. And, one thing that I think a lot of older millennials, Gen X, and the rest of everybody kind of don't realize is that, first of all, going viral is hard. It's a lot harder than people think it is. But I think the more important thing, especially coming out of the pandemic and the growth of TikTok, is that up until fairly recently, TikTok only had one pool of money to draw from to actually pay people. So when you saw people getting these, 500, 600 million view TikToks, they were not making money.
And frankly, programmatic. So there's something called programmatic advertising that a lot of websites go to. And obviously, we are seeing a resurgence in some areas of websites, like TheVerge.com has been able to build a profitable website. I'm a big fan of Nilay Patel and his work. Go listen to Decoder. It's a great, great podcast. But in reality, most websites, you'll go to a mainstream newspaper website and you'll see it festooned, filled with ads. Those ads pay nothing, almost nothing. It annoys the heck out of your experience. It pays nowhere near enough to cover the costs of this. Most people, I don't think, realize that media in general, and especially local media, is in a complete financial crisis.
Yeah, and has been for a while. And, everybody gets upset because, older folks, they're in this sort of paradigm where, their local news coverage was either free because of network television or didn't cost that much. The paper was not that expensive back in the day. But first of all, papers have been gutted through consolidation and through thanks Gannett, but through consolidation and through
hedge funds, all that
hedge
stuff,
funds and all the rest of that stuff. And then it's been fed into the online, garbage machine to be trained on AI models and for not much else. And, you get to that point to where I feel like news and information about your local municipalities has been devalued so much by the overall national and global conversations that you lose the ability for people to go out and seek that local commentary. Not listeners of Daily Detroit. You guys are wonderful because you've made an active choice
to be here
and to listen to a local news show. And that's important. But also at the same time, the same is not happening for your local newspaper.
Or a lot of outlets. And frankly, there's more work that we could do as well. How we got here is interesting to me because there was this idea, and this is part of that virality, that you open up these social networks and all this stuff, and your paper in Peoria, Illinois could go viral and get all this traffic if it just hit the right thing. And it was this false sense of possible success.
Yep.
Because at the end of the day, it's in the tens of thousands of people, maybe hundreds if you're lucky, that will care about any issue. In fact, some niche stuff, it's in the hundreds.
Yeah.
In a model where you're making a couple of bucks or $5 or $10 per thousand, maybe 10 if you're lucky, in a print situation, there's no way to pay for any of that coverage. And from an advertising point of view, it's been so devalued. And then papers and outlets chased all these things with social media because so much in media, we didn't want to deal with the other side of the house. So when Facebook was like, let's do video, and there's this giant pivot to video and it gutted newsrooms. I don't want to talk too far out of school, but I do know somebody who worked at a paper that all the numbers that Facebook was giving them was fake. They put all of this money into it. It netted nothing. Nothing. Almost nothing for them.
Yeah.
And it decimated their coverage. And everybody got into this whole idea of chasing whatever the social media platforms do. At the end of the day, the social media platforms have no interest in your success, and it's far easier for them to make a bunch of money off of the next crop of teenagers and 20-year-olds because the incentive system is not set up for work.
No.
It's set up for quick hits. It's set up for we're going to work all these hours and we're going to spend all this time for very little money and clout. And when you get older, you know what? Bye.
And this is why you're actually starting to see a lot of brands, marketers, and a lot of other folks pivot back towards long form video, long form content, blogs, because the rest of the viral stuff isn't searchable. That's why it's worth nothing, because it disappears or it dies or
it's also not culturally relevant for that long.
Yeah.
Because people don't stick in their mind. Most people don't know what they're watching. When they visit a website, stats show, like if you visit a website off of Facebook, nearly half of people have no idea where they are. They think they're on Facebook.
Yeah. And so, that is a really, really, important thing that I think when we move forward and we talk about the media and we talk about the news, it is we have to, first of all, understand what the platforms want and what the consumer wants. And I think too often we've said, well, this is what the consumer wants. We've pushed it and blamed it and say, this is what people want. This is what people click on. And not understanding that, no, the platforms have made it so, that the algorithm has made it so that that's what people desire. But I will say this. For everybody listening to this show and for everybody who is concerned about the state of media, because I think if you're listening to a show like Daily Detroit, the state of local media and the state of news media concerns you at least a little bit, is that you got to vote with your dollars, folks. You got to. If you want local media, if you want news to survive in this country, which it is being assaulted from all fronts via consolidation, via AI, via hedge funds, via all this stuff, you have to vote with your dollars and say, no, I want a person. I want a person that I know, that I trust, to go there and find out what the hell happened in my town. That's what you have to do. Because otherwise, all of this stuff is just going to be gobbled up and gutted by either the social media platforms or the New York Times. And we're getting to a vacuum situation where the New York Times will be the only newspaper singularity, and everything will just be a branch of the New York Times. And that's not a good thing. As much as I read the New York Times,
The word apocalypse.
I don't want every paper to be the New York Times, period.
So in reality, memberships matter, so do sponsorships, but neither works without the other anymore, especially in our vertical. There's kind of got to be both. And a lot of people have stepped up. I encourage people to step up and also give feedback on what do you want to hear? What do you want to see? As part of why we're relaunching our website.
Yeah.
Engineer
really
Randy's
exciting.
putting in double time with this, doing more with our newsletter, providing value, being like, okay, here are the 5 or 10 things you need to know today. And then the context to go with them in a way that's like, here is the best of the best in Metro Detroit to provide value. Because what you have to do, and a mentor of mine taught me this, she's now in the Journalism Hall of Fame, Marge Sorge. I learned so much from her. She was the first female automotive editor. You always have to have a +1. Where a lot of, and this is on us too, as creators, a lot of people just repeat the same thing over and over again, and you have 50 stories that are exactly the same.
Yep.
You have to provide a +1, whether it's a new fact, whether it's an analysis, whether it's an insight. Without a +1, you are then a commodity.
You're just the AP. You're just a branch of the AP. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. You got to provide that. But, this is where personalities, shows like Daily Detroit, and many other shows, not just ours, you guys' support means the world to us. But I want you to feel and understand that what you're doing is actually much larger than you. It is a much more important and virtuous thing that you're doing in supporting local and independent media, because ultimately we're moving towards a world where independent media will be the only media left. And, you got to choose who you want to support and you want to hear from. And you, listener, are already doing that.
I think I'll leave it there, Norris Howard.
All right, man. It's a very, very important conversation to me as a media professional. And even though we had some feedback today that disagreed with me, this is the beauty of it.
Yeah.
This is the thing that
A community conversation.
Yes, this is the thing that makes it wonderful. I'm not offended by any of those comments. I don't think less of any of those folks who say anything that disagreed with me. I'm happy to talk to y'all, and I'm happy to have these conversations, because ultimately this is going to end up being one of the only places we can do it.
Well, if you want to support us, patreon.com/dailydetroit. Become a member. That's patreon.com/dailydetroit. If you've got more feedback, dailydetroit@gmail.com, or leave a voicemail, 313-789-3211. With that, I'm Jer Stays.
I'm Norris Howard.
Remember that you are somebody, and we'll talk tomorrow.